Black, 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 black on black, everything black, blicky, blicky, black, 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 black. So I've had my coffee, I've had my Red Bull. So we just gonna hop right into this thing. I'm feeling reckless for Black History Month. Not too reckless because I gotta represent for the people. But I will say this episode is gonna be a quickie. We're just gonna talk about one person only, and her name is the Octavia Butler. So, welcome to the Breeze Podcast. My name is Dre Breezy, and let's get to it. So, many of you who know me know that I love science fiction. I'm going to talk about it all the time. But my favorite science fiction writer happens to be a lesser known person. And I'm just going to use this episode to talk about her and raise her up to the levels of genius that, she deserves. Her name is Octavia Butler, and she is a force of nature. I think she's one of America's greatest writers, and she's one of my personal idols. I just knew that it wouldn't be Black History Month without me mentioning her brilliance at least once every waking second. So let's brush through her life. Octavia Estelle Butler was born June 22nd in 1947 in Pasadena, California. Her father died when she was a young child. Butler was an only child, and she grew up poor, dyslexic, shy, and tall. She was called Junie because her mother's name was also Octavia. I also wondered, why don't women pass on their names in the same way that men pass on their basic ass names? Like, we have enough Matthews and Rogers in the world. Like, let's get some more Octavias. So at 10 years of age, Octavia was given a typewriter and she began to write. Butler was educated at Pasadena City College, California State University, and the University of California at Los Angeles. She was encouraged by fellow writer Harlan Ellison, and she began her professional writing career in 1970. The first series that she wrote are called the Patternist series, and they absolutely blew my mind. They're published in reverse order. So while the first story is set on Earth by the end, I guess they're all set on Earth. The time span or the time scale over this series is millennia. It starts with Wild Seed chronologically, which is about Anyan Wu and Doro, who are two immortal humans, I guess, immortal beings that basically world built and create societies and just navigate being immortal around a bunch of mortals. So the entire series basically, and they're mortal for two different ways. So Anyan Wu is a shapeshifter, and she lives just forever. She just doesn't die. She can shapeshift into a man, a woman, anything in between, a child, animals. She can heal people and things with her like spit, and she just never dies. Doro can basically transfer consciousness to other bodies. So he can hop from body to body to body, body to body, body. And for some reason, when he's in these bodies, their life force gets used up more quickly. So he has to hop to another body often, but that's how he stays alive. Essentially, the stories in these books are the stories of them and their children who also have superpowers. A lot of them are strong. Some of them are telekinetic. A lot of them are telepaths. And the pattern master and Clay's arc basically tell the story of the growth of the telepaths. And the telepaths begin to create these societies, and the politics and the ethics behind the telepathy and how do you interact around people that don't have telepathy and when you can control them, like the ethics behind that. And there's just the whole story. They're concise, but the scale of them is so immense, and it tells such clever, creative stories that I was hooked. In between writing those stories, she actually writes Kindred in 1979, which is probably her most popular novel. I read that when I was in middle school or maybe in high school, and I had to read that for a class in college. And Kindred is fucking nuts. It's basically about this woman, Dana, who's, doing her thing in the 70s. And for some reason, she's just transported back to slave times, like in the antebellum South of Maryland, and she's on a plantation. And it basically is how she navigates trying to survive. She also gets transported back, but the time difference isn't the same. So she'll be back in, slave times for like a month. And then when she gets transported back to the 70s, it'll be like, a couple hours. It's just it's wild. It's an absolutely wild story, and it makes you think like, how would I have survived in this situation? It's a conversation that so many Black people have, like, how would I have survived? And that's in fact the inspiration for writing this. Is she said like a lot of Black youth would have been like, I would have smacked massa, I would have told, man, I ain't gonna have nobody telling me what to do. And it's like, okay, like, here's the reality of what these people had to go through. And you mean to tell me that your Billy Badass wannabe motherfucking ass like could have handled this, or could have like bucked this oppressive system? It's like motherfuckers can't even buck the rude ass lady, at the DMV. Like, and it's like, you mean to tell me like you gonna buck this whole oppressive system? Kindred is, I will put at the top of the list of like books that you should read. And it's probably the least science fictiony of all of her work. In 1984, she releases Bloodchild. I didn't read that. It's set on an alien planet. In 1987, she comes out with the Xenogenesis trilogy, which is Dawn, Adulthood Rights, and Imago. I read these over and over and over and over and over again. Short story: nuclear war has all but destroyed humanity and most of the earth. An alien species, the Oankali, has come and rescued us. And they started with a human, it's a Black woman named Lilith. She's given supernatural powers and tasked with rebuilding human civilization. It's a difficult task, as you would assume, and she has to basically wrangle together the last remaining tribes of humanity. And the Oankali have their own alien rules. And what's so fascinating about this story is it just has all these communities of like racially mixed people. The Oankali have an intersex, so she plays with like gender, race, class, morals, and ethics. Like, all of her stories just make you think like, what would I do in this situation? It also makes you think about the world you live in and how similar it is, and how close we are to that, how close we are to just collapse. In 1993, from 1993 to 1998, she writes the Earthseed series, which, if we're talking about the collapse of civilization, like, that's literally what these books are about. They depict the struggle of this Earthseed community, which is led by a young Black woman named Lauren. They're created to survive the socioeconomic and political collapse of 21st century America due to poor environmental stewardship, corporate greed, and the growing gap between the wealthy and the poor. So, Lilith's Brood, which is the name of the Xenogenesis series, is commonly known as Lilith's Brood, hits close to home, but the Earthseed series, I mean, it feels like next week. you and I read that a long time ago. I think that was the first series of hers that I read. I think it was Earthseed and then Patternist, and it felt so real. And Lauren is a really, really interesting protagonist because she's an empath, and her weakness in this is a dystopia. So civilization has collapsed. It's pretty much like every man for themselves. Like, neighborhoods have these big walls built up, and there's just rows of just thieves and murderers and rapists like out trying to get your shit all the time. But Lauren, the protagonist, is an empath that literally feels the pain of any person that she's looking at. Like if you break your arm and she sees it, she feels the pain of that. And so in this society where people are being hurt all the time, it's a huge, huge weakness. But it really informs her philosophy, and it really informs the Earthseed philosophy. I could see how you would see do no harm is a pretty strong tenet. And these stories are just so complex. And even as a young teenager, I remember reading them and like starting to shift and rethink my politics and the way I view the world and the way I interacted with the state, the way I interacted with my environment, the way I interacted with money. And that's what I love about Butler's work is even though sometimes they're set in these like fantastical worlds or set millions and millions of years into the future, it just feels like still so rooted in the human experience and so rooted in the Black experience, the marginalized experiences of communities, and to tell these stories of triumph and struggle and having sex with aliens from a Black perspective, from the perspective of a Black woman, is so refreshing and just exciting. Bloodchild won her the Nebula Award, the Locus Award, the Hugo Award, the Science Fiction Chronicle Award, and the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation Genius Grant. Parable of the Talents won her the Nebula Award, the Arthur C. Clarke Award, the James Tiptree Jr. Award, and Publishers Weekly. Unfortunately, Octavia Butler died outside of her home in Lake Forest Park, Washington, on February 24th, 2006. She was only 58. I have not read all of her work because I never want to feel the disappointment of not being able to freshly receive her genius. Butler will always be my biggest inspiration for becoming a writer. Her imaginative takes on race, sex, and gender launch my own understanding about humanity and our restrictive views on freedom and choice. If you have not read her work, make it a prerogative. Her work is genre bending and mind blowing. She is a science fiction writer, but her work is so much more than that. It's inspiring, it's sobering, it's challenging, and it's everything that amazing art should be. I did a little bit of research on the racial makeup of publishing companies in America. A 2016 report by The Guardian reported that American publishing has found its way to be blindingly white and female, with 79% of staff being white and 78% being women. Unfortunately, only 3.5% of staff at publishing companies are Black or African American. Thank you again for listening. There's so much more I can say about Octavia Butler, but I just want you to like try to take a look at her work. It's incredible. Her stuff is incredible, and I really don't think she has very many contemporaries. I wish she was still here. I wish she was still writing. But her legacy, lives on through such an amazing catalog. So thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you all learned something. This is one of our quickies, our Black History Month quickie. I just wanted to shout out my favorite author. And next episode, I don't know who we're going to talk about, but it's going to be somebody interesting. You all take care and have a good night and be safe.